Hi, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is January 18th, and we're on page 51 in your magazines. And today we're going to hear about a story from quite some time ago that's actually kind of mysterious and interesting.
Well, as a matter of fact, this is the first book that we've talked about in this kind of series we've been having that I've never heard of.
And that's amazing. So you know how well read Chris is. In this case, though, I happen to have read it, but I read it with my ears. It was an audiobook available in our university library, and I was just borrowing everything I saw on the shelves. That's how I happened to read this story.
Yeah, this is actually quite a famous book series. This is one book in a series of 18 total stories written by the author we'll discuss today. And a little bit passé today. They're a little old-fashioned. They're a little bit racist. But it's important to look at these things and understand that these are historical documents in many ways, that they reflect the ideas of a society at a time. And although we may find these ideas gross and kind of uncomfortable today and therefore maybe not as popular, that doesn't mean that it doesn't reflect and you can learn from a society as it is from these books.
I remember the first time that I learned about South Africa, I thought, why are they all white? What the heck happened? That was the very first time. I was quite young. I had no idea. South Africa. Africa to me meant black people, especially if it's like sub-Saharan. And I thought, they're all white. What's going on here?
There's some incredible, interesting history, but a lot of it is based from a European perspective because, well, for a few reasons. Number one, the resources just don't necessarily exist from some societies in Africa. It's usually a very hot or a very wet or a very kind of place that's difficult to maintain records. And so a lot of them have wasted away over the years. And then a lot of the surviving literature does come from Europeans, and they're going to give you their perspective on what they see. And a lot of times those are kind of complicated issues.
There we go. Complicated is an understatement.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And so when we're going to look through this book today, we're going to try to piece these apart and see if we can't understand and dive into some mental psychology of what we're seeing in these books.
That's right. So when I realized this was due to colonization, as has happened in so many countries, we've got North America. That's north of Mexico. Mexico was also colonized by Europe, though, and all of Central and South America. Then we've got Australia, and we've got India, basically, also Hong Kong, South Africa. All of these places have been colonized by Europeans. And the process is something I think we should understand more in order to better understand why we are where we are now.
I agree. In fact, that's a big point I make to my students when we talk about history, that the modern history of the world today extends back to the colonization period. To me, at least in my mind, when you mark out what is modern history, it begins with the exploration outside of Europe, at least from a European perspective. And all of those ideas of spreading Western ideas, spreading colonization for all of its good and all of its evils, it leads into those modern complicated issues of like World War I and World War II, which of course leads us into the Cold War and then today.
Always remember that there is no yang without yin. Yin and yang. We've got both. So whatever you see that has happened, there was a lot of black behind it, a lot of darkness. We like to just view things in convenient bullet points. But behind every bullet point, you're going to find a lot of stuff going on that's not going to look very nice. And there's another thing, is we run the danger of interpreting old things through the lens of modern times. So, for example, women's rights or gay rights or anything like that, civil rights, the races. So when we look at old writings, we're saying, oh, this guy was so racist. Oh, he was a misogynist. He was so sexist. Misogynist, you're going to have to look that up yourself. When we see that, we get very judgmental. But the problem is they lived in a different time. They hadn't gone through all these processes that got us where we are now. And we're not done. We still do a lot of things really badly. Okay, so let's jump into our story. Our title is King Solomon's Mines. That's the name of the book. King Solomon's Mines. Now, who was King Solomon?
Well, King Solomon is the legendary Jewish king. He was the last person to rule over a unified Jerusalem. He also built the temple. There's some long stories we could get into with King Solomon. But he is a legendary figure from the Bible, and he weighs heavily in the very Christian-influenced European history.
All right. So our title again, King Solomon's Mines. King Solomon's Mines is a fictional story set in South Africa and told from the perspective of the protagonist, Alan Quatermain. An accomplished elephant hunter and explorer, he has been hired by the Dane, Sir Henry Curtis, to locate Curtis's long-lost brother, George Neville, who vanished while searching for the legendary diamond mines of King Solomon.
Quatermain assembles a group of foreigners and natives from several tribes, being in possession of an ancient map that supposedly contains a route to the mines. Quatermain's party sets off into the wilderness.
The search party traverses a desert, a mountain range, a volcanic plain, and then some snow-covered peaks. While taking shelter from a snowstorm in a cave, they lose one of their members to the cold and also happen upon the 300-year-old corpse of the explorer whose map Quatermain possesses. After discovering a lush and fertile valley with water and plenty of game, they meet local hunters from the Kukuana tribe.
After tricking the hunters into believing that the foreigners come from the stars, Quatermain's group accompanies the tribal party back to the capital city of Lu. There, they witness a witch hunt and executions led by King Twala and his advisor Gagul. The next day, it is revealed that one member of Quatermain's group, Ignosi, is actually the rightful ruler of the Kukuanas. A civil war breaks out and Ignosi is victorious.
Ignosi demands that Gagul bring the foreigners to King Solomon's mine. She reluctantly agrees and brings them to the Three Witches Mountains, where she opens a hidden door. The men follow her down the corridor and finally come upon the diamonds they were after. While they are admiring the splendor, Gagul attempts to trap the men inside, but fate conspires against her, and she is crushed to death as the door closes shut. Now, I am going to guess that most of you, as listeners, did not follow this story. This is really complex, and if you're just kind of listening casually without paying close attention to every detail, this is pretty tough to follow. Because I know that when I read it for the first time before we recorded, I had to spend some time, and I've read this book before, I had to spend some time working out who is who and who is doing what, who is male, who is female. It took me a while just to bring the whole thing together. And I'm a native speaker who has read the book before. So for a non-native speaker who has not read the book, be patient with yourself. Go over this really carefully until you understand it all and can pull the whole thing together. It's going to take effort.
Is this one of those books that's written in that really heavy 19th century English, or is it pretty straightforward?
It's pretty 19th century.
Is it? Yeah.
Yes.
19th century literature either is extremely clear and well-written and it's quite enjoyable, or it's
flowery.
Yeah, you know, the image I had in my mind was it was like a pancake, like really thick batter.
Dense.
Very dense, that's right. Like Charles Dickens, to me, is like the epitome, the most 19th century thing you can. Just so much information.
That's right. A lot of information packed pretty densely, flowery language,
Yes.
using a lot of words we don't often use now. Maybe most people didn't use them back then, but they were writers and they wanted to show off. It was something to get used to. So if you're a native speaker, it may take you a while to get used to it. And you can see how dense this piece is. Well, listening to the story, you really have to be paying attention and you have to be interested and into it or you'll get lost. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. King Solomon's Mines, it's just the title of the book, is also the title of our piece. And this is part 1. We're going to hear part 2 tomorrow, so make sure you tune in then. Our first sentence, King Solomon's Mines is a fictional story set in South Africa and told from the perspective of the protagonist, Alan Quatermain. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff here, and all of it is worth learning. So first of all is the title of the book, which we've already discussed. It is not a biography, it's not a history, it's not a true story, it's made up based on the situation of a particular place and period in time. This is a made-up story. It's for fun. And this guy went on to write a bunch of other fictional stories. He was not extremely successful. This one is the most popular. Most people know this one. The other one's not so much. And this is the only one. Well, I don't know if I read others by this author, but they're not as famous. So the story is not a true story. It is just basically a novel, fictional. Set in, if the setting of or the environment in which the story takes place is a certain place, we say it is set in. And set is the past participle of set. So set it down. He set it down. It has been set down. All three forms are the same, set. In South Africa. So make sure you know a little about South Africa. If you don't, take some time and do a little reading on Wikipedia about South Africa. You really should understand the background of this very complex and interesting place. By the way, I did visit South Africa. I was there for a little over a month. I absolutely loved it. I don't love their crime rate. One thing that makes South Africa unlivable for many South Africans, and they move, is the crime rate is terrible. But it is a beautiful, colorful coming together of very diverse cultures. And they love to sing and dance, and that's what I loved about it. Even going to church was really fun because they were just moving around and linking arms and singing in 4 parts. So I really love South Africa, but it has a terrible crime rate. Okay. So, and told from the perspective, that's a fancier word for point of view. That means it's the world how I see it from my eyes standing in this place. That's the perspective of the protagonist. The protagonist is the main character of the story, the one who we follow, who we care about most. Okay? Do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
It was very thorough.
Okay. In that case, we're going to move on. Oh, also the pronunciation of Quatermain. I believe that's a made-up name, and I had to look it up. And I listened to several people read it before I had any confidence in reading it. So apparently it is Quatermain. And Alan with 2 L's and an A-N. There are many spellings for the name Alan. Somebody says everybody knows an Alan Wong. I guess there are lots of Alan Wongs in the world.
I've taught many Alan Wong in my life. I suspect that Quatermain is related to the word quartermaster because of how resourceful he is. He's a hunter. So that's my suspicion, but that's without evidence.
Okay, that's possible. In any case, his name is pronounced Alan Quatermain. Next sentence, an accomplished elephant hunter and explorer, he has been hired by the Dane Sir Henry Curtis to locate Curtis's long-lost brother, George Neville, who vanished while searching for the legendary diamond mines of King Solomon. My head is spinning. Now, I had a little exchange with Wesley. We recorded before we recorded this program. I said, our brains have shortcuts. When we are listening to people talk or when we're reading, our brain will ignore certain information to make it easier to understand the important parts. And there are 2 things that my brain systematically ignores whether I am listening or reading. Do you want to guess?
I'm not sure. Where are you going here?
Okay. The first one is the names of people. I just ignore them because that's somebody's name. I'll look it up if I need to remember who it is. I just ignore people's names. That's why I often don't remember people's names when I meet them again, which is not a good thing. I'm not recommending you do what I do. But I just tend to ignore names. They just go by, and I think, well, if I need it, I'll look it up. So I have to make a real effort. I try harder now when I meet somebody new. I rehearse their name or I will forget it. But if I'm just listening to a story, I just throw out the name. I think that's, who cares?
I quite agree with you. I do think that authors sometimes forget that they're not referencing their own characters' names enough. Because especially if it's a minor character, if you're not bringing this name up several times, you're not going to know who you're talking about.
Right.
In personal settings, when I know I have new people around me with perhaps they don't know everybody's names, I purposely use everybody's names more. I don't say, oh, look at this person or that person. I make sure I use everyone's name so everyone has a chance to hear the name several times. I'm very aware of that.
That's a really, really good habit. Okay, learn from Chris on this one. Don't learn from me. Okay, I have tried and I think I've improved, but it's an effort. Now, these names are also not common modern names. Quatermain and George Neville, I guess there are Nevilles, but it sounds very British to me. And then Henry Curtis, especially with the Sir. I can't relate to them easily and I don't remember them easily. So number 1, my head is spinning. And of course, King Solomon I'm familiar with, but that's just one more name after 3. So first of all, the names are hard to keep straight, and I don't know these characters yet, so I can't give them nicknames. So I'm just telling you, in short, this is a loaded sentence. It's full of information and names, and it's really easy to get lost. So if you are reading rather than listening, slow down, sort out the sentence name by name, character by character, and then you might get it straight. So that's the first kind of information that I tend to forget. The other kind of information I edit out is numbers. I just don't care about numbers. I'll be listening to big numbers and I just will edit them out so I won't know them later. Okay, it looks like Chris is anxious to move on to his paragraph.
Quatermain assembles a group of foreigners and natives from several tribes.
All right, so these are several tribes of natives. For the foreigners, we're thinking of Europeans who were mostly British and Dutch. Those are the people, the white people who settled South Africa mainly. So we wouldn't call, tribes of Brits and tribes of Dutch. We use that to refer to the tribes of the local people who are mostly black Africans.
It definitely feels less developed than, we'll just say, assembles a group of foreigners.
That's
There's
right.
a distinct word used here on purpose, tribe.
All right, so group of foreigners, pause, and natives from several tribes. Several tribes only belongs to natives.
Being in possession of an ancient map that supposedly contains a route to the mines, Quatermain's party sets off into the wilderness.
All right, now you have to get some names straight here. We've got Quatermain. We've already met him. He has a group of people with him, and they have this map. Now, that sounds like the beginning of all kinds of mystery stories. They have this map that leads you to a secret treasure. Okay, so supposedly, they're not sure. They've been told that on this map, you can find how to get to these mines that have these wonderful diamonds.
It was thought that diamonds only came from India up until about the end of the 18th century, the 1700s. And however, there was a small diamond mine found in Brazil, and then a 21-carat diamond was found on the Orange River in South Africa. And before this period, Europeans stayed away from Africa. It was far too dangerous. Malaria, that little disease you get from mosquitoes, was just a massive killer. And so for him to explore the interiors of Africa is considered a very brave and very dangerous thing to do.
But on the other hand, if the reward is great enough,
it's a great reward.
Europeans are going to show up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next paragraph. The search party traverses a desert, a mountain range, a volcanic plain, and then some snow-covered peaks. So in a very relatively short sentence, we have covered a lot of ground here. We crossed. Traverse means cross. This is a less common but a very useful word. Traverse a desert. We crossed a desert, a mountain range, a volcanic plain. That's a flat area of land after there's been a volcano and the lava has spread out and made it flat. And then some snow-covered peaks. These are mountains again, but they're very tall, so they have snow at the top. While taking shelter from a snowstorm in a cave, they lose one of their members to the cold and also happen upon the 300-year-old corpse of the explorer whose map Quatermain possesses.
This was complex.
This is what drove me nuts about this article the first time. This is my native language, but we've got these characters that are already confusing me, and now the sentence is really complex. Can you help us?
Yeah, so this is a tough one. So we're hiding from this snowstorm while traversing this range, and then while they're hiding in this cave during the snowstorm, they happen upon, which means to accidentally find the dead body, the corpse of this person, and they have this map that they're using to try to find King Solomon's mines. So it's like, wow, oh my goodness.
That's right. That corpse, when it was alive, is the one who drew the map, apparently. That's where the map comes from. It was this person.
That's
it's
quite a coincidence.
Old. It is, yeah. I think how can you have a good mystery without a lot of good coincidences? After discovering a lush and fertile valley with water and plenty of game, they meet local hunters from the Kukuana tribe. So after all of these places that were very difficult to cross, they find a valley. That means water's going to flow down. Lush means there's lots of grass and trees and other vegetation. Fertile things grow very well. There's water, which is key. That's important. You can't survive without water. Plenty of game means animals that you can shoot and you can eat their meat. And in that place, they met some local people. They were hunters and they belonged to the tribe that went by the name of Kukuana.
Our next paragraph begins, after tricking the hunters into believing that the foreigners come from the stars, Quatermain's group accompanies the tribal party back to the capital city of Lu.
Now that's funny because Lu is the British word for toilet.
I thought that too.
Okay, now in order to try and get the local people to fear them, they told these local people, we come from the stars, we have special powers. And so his group went with the tribal people back to the capital city of this area, which was named Lu.
But this has a historical basis. This is actually true in history. In Mexico, there were a tribe called the Aztecs, and on the 500th birthday of one of their fiercest gods, Quetzalcoatl, is this serpent demon that also had feathers with red hair, white skin, and light eyes. Hernan Cortez arrives on a ship with crossbows, 16 horses, and armies of metal-plated soldiers. He looked like their actual god on his birthday. And they said, oh, our god really came back on his birthday? And so Cortez takes the king ransom, and he demands a room full of gold, and then kills him anyways.
And that was the beginning of the end for the Aztec culture.
That's exactly right. And there's historical basis to this story.
Okay, next sentence.
There they witness a witch hunt and executions led by King Twala and his advisor, Gagul.
All right, so when they get to Lu, then they see that people are trying to catch a suspected witch. And when they catch the witch, they're going to kill the witch. All right, who is leading this witch hunt and who is doing the killing? It's their king. His name is King Twala, and he has an advisor named Gagul, a woman.
Our next sentence begins the next day. It is revealed that one member of Quatermain's group, Ignosi, is actually the rightful ruler of the Kukuanas.
Now that sounds kind of scary because if I'm king and someone says, actually, I'm the real king, we're going to have a power struggle.
We're going to have a fight.
Something's going to happen here. So the next day, they find that one of the local people, whose name was Ignosi, who was accompanying Quatermain in his group and who brought them to Lu, it turns out he was actually supposed to be the ruler of the Kukuanas. And a civil war breaks out, and Ignosi is victorious. Boy, they saved a lot of details there. So, of course, if someone's king and someone else says, no, I'm the real king, you're going to have a fight. And they did have a fight, civil war. It's people who belong to the same tribe, basically. But Ignosi won.
This also happened with the Cortez story that I shared earlier. Our final paragraph.
Ignosi demands that Gagul bring the foreigners to King Solomon's mine. So that's pretty straightforward. Ignosi says to Gagul, bring us to King Solomon's mine. That's what we're here for. We want the diamonds. She reluctantly agrees and brings them to the Three Witches Mountains, where she opens a hidden door. Now, because she has basically been conquered, she's not going to be happy about bringing them to the riches. So she's probably got a trick up her sleeve, and she does. So she says, well, that's our diamonds. I don't want to do this. I said, no, you bring us. Ignosi is the new king. So she brings them there, and then she opens a door that's hidden. People can't easily find it. That's how they protected the diamonds. The men follow her down the corridor and finally come upon the diamonds they were after. So she's not happy about it, but she brings them inside. A corridor is a hallway, and then they found the diamonds. They were real, and they were there. While they are admiring the splendor, Gagul attempts to trap the men inside, but fate conspires against her, and she is crushed to death as the door closes shut. So her trick was to try to seal them inside the mine so they couldn't come out and they would die there without food. But in the end, her trick didn't work because she got crushed by the door and she died.
The end.
That's the end, exactly.
Well, the end of day one.
The end of day one, which makes it a cliffhanger. And the only way you're going to find out what happens is by listening tomorrow. So I hope we see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.